Story 1. Moving back to a phonics-based reading curriculum would help. Whole language just does not work well for most kids. Encouraging parents to read physical books to or with their kids from an early age is also key. Allowing kids to repeat grades in early elementary school is also important. Some kids need a second try, and that is better than allowing them to advance without the foundational building blocks needed for more advanced material. Story 2. Actually invest in education so there are not 40 children in a kindergarten class, which means the teacher is just trying to prevent chaos rather than being able to truly focus on reading lessons. Story 3. 1. Keep them off social media at such a young age. Make parents more accountable for helicopter parenting, although I would hedge my bets on the parents being just as illiterate. Stop taking all the power away from teachers so that they can identify and remove troublesome students, and actually allow teachers to fail students who are nowhere near the level of comprehension they should be, instead of being forced to pass them. Given the very real effort from billionaire technology companies to deliberately dumb down the world to keep people addicted, stupid, and unable to critically think, good luck. My heart goes out to teachers everywhere who are attacked for just trying to educate kids. Story 4. Pay living wages so parents don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs and can read with their children. Socioeconomic conditions play a large role in children's performance. Story 5. Pay teachers more. Require that children demonstrate basic competency before graduation. Provide remedial classes for children who aren't reading at grade level. Do not advance children who can't read at grade level in some language, allowing some flexibility for children still learning English. Aggressively identify and support children with disabilities that make reading difficult, such as vision problems and learning disabilities. Stop promoting boring, irrelevant classics to children. Let them read anything that holds their interest. They can discover works like Moby Dick and Jane Eyre later. Children will read for fun if you let them. Story 6. You probably want to start by not electing a president and other officials who want to close the Department of Education and aren't constantly criticizing education. Those are the ones who have power and are able to determine where funding goes. Story 7. Not abolish the Department of Education and set national standards in teaching and testing, not curriculum. Some local autonomy is needed, and hold teachers, schools, school boards, and state politicians accountable when that doesn't happen. Oh, who am I kidding? The current administration doesn't want them to be competent at reading and comprehension. Story 8. Hold them back. There should be 0 8th graders who can't read. You learn to read in kindergarten. The fact they passed through 7 more grades while being illiterate is unacceptable. Story 9. Invest in our human capital, our children. Increase education funding 20 times the current amount. It is so foolish, generation after generation, of terrible investments in our children. It is economically disastrous. So foolish. Story 10. Not voting for Republicans would be a good start. But they are more interested in children working at McDonald's in order to eliminate free lunch, much less reading classes. Story 11. School isn't going to fix this. The problem is at home. Kids aren't reading with their guardians. Instead, they're watching TikToks, YouTube, and Reels, which all require 0 reading. Ban social media for youths and you have a chance at helping this. Story 12. The most important thing we should recognize is that educational failures are largely secondary effects of larger social problems. The literature about educational interventions shows that while teaching effects are absolutely real, they pale in comparison to environmental effects like household stability and violence in the household. In summary, you fix this problem by fixing families, not by fixing education. Story 13. My mom is a retired teacher. I read at least 20 minutes a night, most nights, but definitely more often than not during my elementary years. I do the same for my son. It really makes a major impact, as many people are saying the same thing. Other than that, we could use a complete education reform so every child has an equal opportunity but more tailored to the child's specific needs. With that being stated, the No Child Left Behind Act has been a huge issue as well. Story 14. Teach the kids phonics. Improve socioeconomic conditions so parents can spend time with their kids reading and engaging in activities. However, many parents also lack knowledge and understanding. Story 15. Funding is tied to graduation rates. This is why kids who shouldn't graduate are graduating. Then the funding gets earmarked for the sports program instead of academics, and now we have teachers who don't have the resources they need to support underperforming graduates. This is how you end up taking a third-grade reading level all the way with you to high school and beyond. No child left behind left every child behind. Story 16. A really good podcast on this subject. Get ready to get mad. The gist is that some educators came up with a method of teaching kids to read that flat out doesn't work at all, and there was plenty of evidence it didn't work, but it made lots and lots and lots of money for the people who came up with it and the publishing company that sold the resources for it. Adherents of this method were practically a cult in the educator community. And for over 20 years, they pushed this failure of an idea on a whole generation and a half of kids. It's called reading recovery. Instead of learning how to sound out letter combinations to decipher words, kids are taught to look at the first letter of a word and guess the rest from context. The problem is a kid using this method has no way of distinguishing running from rolling or jumping from jogging. Some kids are able to figure it out on their own, but most kids are out of luck trying to read anything that doesn't have pictures to clue them into what is actually happening. Story 17. I feel like taking America as a whole isn't helpful for specific solutions. Too many regional factors are at play, but a safe bet would be to increase funding for social services and education. It has to be both, though, because the best-funded schools in the world won't help students who have to drop out to work to support their family, for example. Story 18. My mom got me super into reading as a little kid by going to bookstores with me and letting me pick out age-appropriate books that appealed to me. I think part of it is parent participation. School can't cover every single little thing. Story 19. Well, one thing we could do is question if these test scores even reveal what they claim to reveal. But that would require critical thinking instead of taking them at face value. Story 20. My prescription is to triple the pay for school teachers right now. After a year or so, fire about 1/3 because they are fakers only in it for the money. We must attract teachers from the best and brightest of our society. They deserve to be paid well, and their value to the community acknowledged. This is not a cheap idea, but it's nowhere close to the defense budget we pay without complaint. The social and political gains from such an investment are simply incalculable. If we aren't willing to invest in our own children, then we need to step aside for China. Be assured, they will stand by their offspring. Story 21. Around the 2000s, American educators would make pilgrimages to Finland to try to learn why they perform so well. Rumor was they stopped inviting the United States because no matter how many times they told them the secret, no one was really listening. It all came down to student-teacher ratios. The answer is more teachers, smaller class sizes. Story 22. I just finished a podcast about why kids struggle with reading. Sold a story by American Public Media Reports. Highly recommend. Unfortunately, our education system is failing our children. Not blaming the teachers, but rather the system that has been in place. Story 23. Different funding for schools, based per student, not property taxes. Higher pay and more credentials for teachers. Lower student-to-teacher ratio. I tutored a kid with 40 students in his first grade class. Story 24. Moving back to phonics for what the government can do. As for what parents can do, reading is a skill. Skills require practice for anyone to be good at the said skill. This means your child needs to read, and the best thing you can do as a parent is to model the behaviors you want to see. If your kids see you reading and you spend time with them, then your kids are more likely to read. It starts when they're babies, but it doesn't actually ever stop. Fun fact, math is also a skill. Be involved in your kids' studies, for goodness sake. But yes, the government could switch us back to phonics. It worked for decades as a great default. Before COVID and Betsy DeVos, Donald J. Trump's Secretary of Education from 2016 to 2020, our literacy rate was maybe 88%. Edit. Fact-checked myself. Story 25. We can start by funding our schools, not closing the Department of Education, stop English writing-based standardized testing, and go back to reading books and diagramming sentences daily. Story 26. I teach first, second, and third grade, and here's my take. 1. Invest in high-quality early childhood education. Background knowledge, general vocabulary, learning songs with rhymes specifically, and being read to are very important. Early childhood education also teaches soft skills, such as sitting for a story, following directions, how to hold a pencil, and many other things. It also allows students with developmental disabilities or speech issues to receive early interventions. Phonics. I think this has generally improved, at least where I work. All the data show that children need systematic, explicit daily phonics instruction. Any program that isn't based on explicit, daily phonics instruction should not be used. As soon as your child begins phonics instruction, they should begin reading to you. There is nothing that can replace one-on-one time with an adult. You can check that the child is approaching new words by sounding them out. Reading out loud to someone else increases fluency. Exercise regularly, get enough sleep, eat nutritious food, and limit screen time. These things help everyone learn more easily. Learning to read involves a lot of hard work and practice. Being able to answer comprehension questions means being able to focus and recall specific details about a passage. Adults struggle to read with this intent because screens train us not to. Story 27. First step would involve removing all Republicans from all three branches of government, which would require people to actually vote. So nothing we can do. Story 28. Vote Democrat. Republicans are outspoken about their love of the uneducated and undereducated. They will continue to cut funding to schools as they have over the last 20 years. Story 29. Stop electing people who want to keep others uneducated and poor. The uneducated and poor have fewer options and often go along with whatever nonsense they are told. Story 30. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid in elementary school, being forced to read certain books because they were on the accelerated reader list was frustrating. I went to a small school, and over half the books I wanted to read weren't available for tests. It left me reading uninteresting books. Story 31. I want to see that study. I have a hard time believing 30 to 35% of 4th and 8th graders are competent readers. Also, I would like to know what they define as competent. Is it fluency, reading accurately and quickly? Is it decoding a word, breaking it down into sounds? Is it an ability to make an inference? Is it a memory thing? Is it all of the above? Story 32. As a teacher, I was told I couldn't do that because I had to focus on the curriculum. Of course, professional determination being what it is, I still do it. I emphasize cursive and multiplication tables, and even though I'm in middle school, they get 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon for recess. I teach kids, not just the curriculum. I dislike these uptight colleagues of mine who are so concerned and say they don't have time. My kids enjoy my classroom and always leave with better skills than they came in with. Story 33. Read with your kids and keep subtitles on when watching television. Both of my young children are advanced readers, and my son was able to tell us at 2 years old when the audio didn't match what the subtitles said at the bottom of the screen. Story 34. Getting rid of No Child Left Behind would be a good starting point. Kids should not be advanced when they haven't mastered the current skill set. Advancing them just leads to harder material without the proper foundation, and as those kids fall further and further behind, teachers are less and less likely to create specialized plans for them. Story 35. Read to them. Bedtime stories were the start of having children invest time into a story. They start to recognize words and soon are reading the stories to you. Story 36. Eradicate the Department of Education, ban more books, put the Bible and the 10 Commandments in every school. Pull funding out of public education and funnel it into Christian private schools. Privatize public education in the United States and let Betsy DeVos run it. I think that sums up the Trump and Republican plan, so the complete opposite of everything I said. Story 37. Keep the interactive screens away from them until 4th grade at least. Video games are not bad in research studies, so I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people handing toddlers phones and iPads and letting them endlessly swipe and scroll. Story 38. 2 things. First, invest in quality public education. The mostly Republican hostility toward the public sphere has had its worst implications for kids in public school. Teachers are underpaid, Facilities are crumbling, and a lot of schools are just holding pens trying to stave off disaster. If America got together and wanted to fix this problem, they could. But there just isn't the political will. Second, parents need to choose to instill a love of reading in kids. Make it a regular practice to read an actual book to them every night. Make it fun and encourage them to develop letter recognition as you do it, then word recognition, and so on. Let them know that reading opens up a vast vista of adventure they can access on their own. So it's a joy and not a chore. Public education may not be fixable, sadly, but this is individual work parents can do themselves. Story 39. Yeah, and all the leftists are going to blame Trump for all these kids being illiterate, right? How do you fix it? By employing better teachers who don't spend all their time on lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer topics and focus on real material, real history, and real science. Story 40. Giving my daughter a Nintendo DS and a copy of Pokemon when she was in kindergarten is how she was motivated to read. She was way ahead of her classmates by second grade. I also read every night with her, but that was what motivated her when she was on her own.